What would Apple need to do to actually compete in the AAA game space? They have the hardware for it. The iPhone's install base puts the Switch to shame, and yet they just don't seem to care. Chose this one for you, Oliver, because you're very invested in the iOS ecosystem and Mac OS, and you've pretty much tested every major AAA game that has come onto that platform. So I'm curious what you make about this, because I'm not sure that Apple don't seem to care, because you don't do things like Metal FX if you don't care about games. But somehow it just doesn't seem to be a gaming platform as such or treated as such. So how do they compete? Should they compete?
I mean, I think Apple is interested in selling phones and advertising, say that the iPhone 15 Pro, as they did, can run a title like Assassin's Creed Mirage. That is a pretty compelling sell to consumers, to say this is a console level experience. Now, of course, part of the problem here is that when those titles launch, they aren't really console level experiences.
Right.
The hardware is not really capable enough. The thermal situation is very challenging. You see in titles like Assassin's Creed Mirage, I think the overall level of the porting quality maybe is not quite there. You see these like lengthy stutters, up to like minute-long stutters, where you're waiting. Maybe stutter is the wrong term, but you're waiting on the game to actually load, it seems like, for long periods. And you end up with all kinds of issues there. Titles like Death Stranding that run at like very, very low resolutions might look okay in terms of settings and might not run at horrible frame rates, but just look super soft. That's not an ideal situation either. And I think perhaps partially as a result, the reported sales of these games through various metrics and various tracking that people have in their phones have been super, super low. That is certainly a concern. Now, I would expect that Apple is sponsoring at least some of these games. But yeah, in general, like, I don't know. I think that probably the mobile market just looks quite different from the AAA market as well. I'm not really sure there is a level of quality at which these games would really be super attractive to people. People want to play PUBG, they want to play Warzone, they want to play Fortnite, they want to play Candy Crush. These are games that are not typical AAA $60 games. The one exception in my experience that actually was a really good experience on the phone was Grid Legends, which looks great and runs really well on phones. But I don't know that even moves the needle too much. I don't really think it's a question of quality. I think it's a question of character. And I think people are interested in games of a different character on their phones. I don't really think that's going to change. On the flip side, platforms like the Switch might not even be as powerful as a modern phone for most users. But there you have this dedicated platform. You have this really good environment for building games. You have built-in controls that are super high quality, right? You have built-in haptics that are super high quality. You have this whole platform that's set up for gaming. And, you don't have any degradation in performance over time because they have a good thermal solution there with active cooling and a fan. So, yeah, I just think it's proven over the course of time, and certainly in the past couple of years, I think, to just be a different kind of market that you're probably realistically never going to completely crack open with a big AAA experience on an iPhone. At best, it's kind of an added bonus, maybe on top of your existing console versions or your Switch port. Maybe you're doing a mobile port at the same time, that kind of thing. I don't really think there's anything you can do to truly crack this market, because Apple has assembled all these technologies and they've put their best foot forward on this. There's, machine learning upscaling on phones, and they just aren't there in terms of the sales. So what else can they do? I don't know.
Well, I think ultimately the kind of games in the AAA space aren't particularly great on a small screen. And obviously the iPhone doesn't have an immediately apparent controller interface that's good for those games. So you have to kind of like kludge on one of those controllers. I guess there are opportunities here, though, because if you do an iOS version of a game, you've basically got a Mac OS version of the game. But, are people buying Macs to play games on? Not really. I'd be intrigued to see how AAA works on the new Mac Mini, which actually seems to be a really performant piece of technology, and is very reasonably priced as well. But it doesn't seem to be the primary focus of that particular ecosystem. I love my MacBook, but I don't use it for gaming, for example. Yeah, so it's a tricky one, right? Because you're right, they have done a lot of great work to create an environment. I think maybe it is just the fact that you don't have a critical mass of games available on it. That's and how do you make that happen? It needs some sort of Steam Deck style Proton moment, really, doesn't it, to make the
Yeah.
existing library of games, quote
Right.
unquote, just work on it. Do you have any thoughts on this, Alex?
No, I have actually. I thought Oliver and you have both encapsulated this really well, and I've always struggled with the mobile gaming thing anyway. So I don't think my opinion is too appreciated for many of the people who watch DF anyway. So
Yeah, because but with the Switch 2 coming along with machine learning and ray tracing, we're going to have to get you one. So maybe we can convert.
I mean, for the purpose of like making a video about DLSS, it does make sense. But then it would just sit there for a really long time, unfortunately, excluding those moments when I have to boot it up for a video. So
alongside your Steam Deck,
my Steam Deck, which I mean, you can't see it, but it's been there for a while. It's
Okay.
right behind me.
Yeah. I'd also just say here as one final thought that Apple actually has a service called Apple Arcade, which I'm personally very fond of. And that's a Game Pass-like service that essentially, as I see it, is a way to make non-microtransaction based games work, hopefully, on a phone. So they give you versions of different games that have already been released, some new releases, some graphically demanding releases, some not so graphically demanding releases, but games that are not microtransaction based, games that would not be free to play, games that would normally cost some amount as an upfront purchase you get through the Apple Arcade service. And as far as I can tell through subscription numbers that people have variously reported, that service is not very popular. So
right?
I don't know. People just seem to like certain kinds of games on phones, and they don't like other kinds of games on phones, and it's hard to shake that player preference, even if the games are great. Now, I personally love AAA games on iPhones. I think that's super cool. When they work out, like as is the case with Grid Legends, I think it's fantastic. But I'm in a small minority of users, right? So it's not not representative of the broader gaming population.